Adventure. Hello, Illumineers, and welcome back to another episode of Ducktail Dads. I'm back. I'm Ryan. I'm back. Had a 1 week
You made it.
We made it, yeah. And I'm joined by Mack this week. Nathaniel gets the week off this time, and we'll get his takes on what we talk about today next week on next week's episode. So today we have some really interesting things to talk about with y'all. It's the holiday season here in the United States, so we'll talk about a holiday-themed deck list, so that'll be fun, and a couple other deck lists that we've had some comments just to say, hey, let's get in on this specific color combination. So stay tuned. We'll talk about those, but first, what's new in your world, Mac?
New in my world. So on your point about the holiday season here in the United States, we had our very first family Christmas celebration this past weekend. A little bit kind of not really nerve-wracking, but with our new son in the family, deservedly or rightfully so, he can get nervous with bigger crowds, especially with people that he hasn't been around before. So we were kind of like building up for that, prepping him throughout the week. Like, hey, you've met a couple of these people before. You're going to be there. There are going to be other kids there, so you'll have time to have fun and play. Thankfully, we've been getting a lot of snow in our area, so it was pretty easy to convince him that, yes, everyone wants to go outside. The house we're going to has a giant sledding hill, and they've gotten a lot of snow. My uncle, we went to my aunt and uncle's house, and he has his own like excavator. So he's like mounted up these giant snow piles, and he was very well prepped to have kids at his house. So as soon as they saw the hills, during our gift opening session, all the kids got these cool hats with like lights on the front, and like flashing lights. So not only were they outside while the sun was still up, after we opened presents, had dinner, the sun was down, they all got their snow gear right back on, and in the pitch black, all we see are these like beaming lights out in the distant yard on these giant snow hills. So they were out in the cold because it was like -5, but kids like never seem to get cold when they're having fun. So they were playing out in the yard for a good hour or two post sunset. So great time. They had a blast. And it's really fun seeing kind of just kids become friends within 5 seconds, after like not seeing each other for, months. So that was a joy. Lorcana wise, I have my entire deck sleeved. I have cards. I'm waiting on 2 to be mailed, but like I have like built my deck, and everything is either here or en route. So I've got a hold of all. I've been doing a lot of wheeling and dealing. Thank you, AJ. Shout out, AJ. You've been a part of that in the last week. I have my deck that I want to run for the Set Champ season. Now it's just a matter of practicing, tweaking tech cards here and there. But yeah, I'm very excited once we get through this holiday season into set 10 Set Champs. I'm excited to go. I'm feeling that competitive itch again, and I think this set is going to be really fun because, to what I've spoke to before, I like a wide meta, and we're starting to see that. So I'm just excited to see like what people are going to bring. Although we alluded to last week kind of the amethyst thing that's going on, I still think there's plenty of decks to be played in this set, and I'm excited to see what's all about. So long new in my world, but I had a lot to share. What about you, Ryan?
So a couple of follow-up questions. You got your deck sleeved. We talked about Set Champs. How do you feel about the prizes, the Set Champs promos for this set, especially compared to Fabled, where Maleficent was probably your favorite, no, hands down, in the last 5 sets. So how do you feel about the Daisy deck?
The investigator one, is it the legendary Daisy?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So I think the legendary Daisy, although it's not kind of like the most sought after legendary in this set, I think there's a way for it to be played in kind of like a cute Amber Sapphire deck, especially when you're able to shift on the 1-drop Daisy. Is it like the top tier right now in terms of what the meta has to bring? No. I think the Daisy could be good as more of those Amber Sapphire combos are released, in my assumption, within the next couple sets. Is it a Maleficent dragon? No. The dragon near and dear to my heart as a red-blue player. Just a beautiful artwork, and I think it was a staple since set one, so really good job on choosing that one. It's hard to beat, especially when compared. The only thing that is only above that, in my opinion, was the Surfer, or the Stitch, the Rockstar Stitch, the very first one. So definitely not that, but definitely not... It's kind of sad because I won this set champs, but definitely not the Mirabelle. So like it's a good middle ground, I think. I mean, the artwork's always has been getting better and better, right? So that's something they have going for it. But I there's room for improvement still. Like, but they also, it's a weird thing, Ryan. Like this set, the Enchanteds they chose, and the Iconics, right? Like they chose some of the core staple cards for an Enchanted and the two Iconic cards anyways. So like how much was really left over? Like I'm sure there was a couple, right? But like the Cinderella had an Enchanted, the Goliath has an Enchanted, right? Like some of the other like those big cards. Yeah, like they all have like Enchanteds already. So like what was left over? I'm sure they could have thought of something, but I think this Daisy still looks good, and it's something that I still want to earn and would feel excited about earning when we come set champ season for sure.
I agree with that take. I think that it kind of feels like in the same vein as the Hero Hamada from that set, from set 7, where it was like, yeah, this is like kind of a cool card. It's not like the most meta card ever, but you could definitely put it to use and get a good list out of it. I'm interested to see how the playmat is handled this time around, see how people feel about that part of the prizing. If there's a repeat of the Hero Hamada days where it's getting chopped up into 4 pieces, but nonetheless, I think that it'll be intact much more frequently than it'll be cut up.
I mean, to your point, I think you're right. I think the protesting will continue with the champ mat until something is resolved on that end. I think, unfortunately, especially since they're seeming to step back even further with the pins and just doing stickers, I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing those pictures roam around social media with chopping up the mat, which is a little unfortunate, but, you know, it is what it is. Doesn't bother me. I'm not going to do it if I win a mat because I earned it, right? But, like, it is what it is. And until I think that hierarchy or that tiered prizing is resolved, there will be stores that I think will continue to protest in their own certain way, which is a little sad, but they got some, I mean, it's fair criticism though too at the same time, in my opinion. So
yeah, and to be fair, it's not necessarily the stores themselves that are protesting, it's the players that are attending those stores too that just have these very strong feelings that there should be some sort of secondary prize for the second place winners because there's no difference then between second and 8th place. And I get that, and I definitely support that. I think there should be a tiered prize structure. I just, you know, I also hope that there is some middle ground that we can find. I don't know if Nathaniel proposed this on the podcast or off the podcast previously, but when we were talking about this topic, Nathaniel did bring up the fact that, you know, bringing pins in as the second place prize could be a nice little middle ground to find with the player base of here's your first place mat, and you get second place, you get a pin, and then there, from so on and so forth from there. So I think that could be cool. We'll see where that goes. And then the second piece that you brought up in your Lorcana section was the amethyst, quote, the amethyst problem, if you will, from our last episode. And I'll dive a little bit more into my thoughts on that after my What's New in My World. So what's new in my world? We also had our first of our holiday celebrations. We had our first Christmas this past weekend. And one of the highlights for me was a gift that I got my wife and I were able to give to our niece, and our niece was very interested last time, I think maybe Thanksgiving or sometime over the summer when they were up here, in the card game that we played, and that's what they termed it because they couldn't quite remember it, but in Lorcana. They were very interested in Lorcana. So for Christmas, they asked their parent for them to learn from my wife and I how to play the card game that we play. And so I got to put together a little holiday or a little Christmas gift package for my niece, and then got to sit down and teach them how to play the game. And so they picked up on it really quick. They're really great reader, really great with math, really bright kid. So they picked up on it very quickly. Put together a couple very simple, pretty vanilla cards. There is some text on them to try to encourage that challenge piece, because I think that's part of the fun of the game is, the learning aspect of it. It's constantly churning at the brain is constantly churning, trying to figure out new combinations and figure out how new cards work. So put a little bit of complexity, nothing too crazy. It was just like, hey, you may draw a card, or you can, this character has one character has rush, and everything else is just vanilla. So that was fun. Got to play a few games. They did beat me. My niece did beat me 2 times out of the 3 games that we played. The 2 games that they were on the play, they won. So there is that to be said. And then my wife actually got to play a pack rush with them too, so that introduced even more of that. Hey, you have this very clean 24 card deck that's pretty vanilla, but then there's also this tons of extra layer of complexity to this game. Just kind of dip the toe in a very controlled manner. So that was cool. It was cool to be able to teach a young kid how to play the game and engage with the game in a different way in that sense, because I got to test my knowledge a little bit of what would be good cards for a new player to learn with, and how do we create these kind of even playing field decks to make it interactive and entertaining. So that was fun. So on a personal front, got to have our first holiday, and it was also, to your point about the holiday spirit and the magic that the children carry with them whenever they go to a gathering like that. We also went out sledding, and it just seemed like the kids were having a blast. We did not have the fancy headlamps, so we were in by dusk, but it was still a blast despite how cold it was. So love that. And on the Lorcana front, go ahead.
My son, for that headlamp, he still wears it. He's been wearing it 24/7 inside. So yeah, I highly recommended. If you ever need just a simple gift for the kids, stocking stuffer though for your listeners, a simple headlamp, a winter hat goes a long way. There was one moment though when we were driving home, still dark. Of course they have the lamps on because they just received it 3 hours ago. One of the settings, it flashes blue and red, and I'm like, ooh, this is really dark, and it's pitch black, and it looks like a cop car. So that's one setting we're not going to do, at least in the car in the middle of the night. During the day, you can't really see it, but it was blitzing, really flashing a lot. So I was like, oh no, that's not a color we could do. So he understood that we had to switch the color, but yeah, be careful with the color settings on that when you're bringing your children in the car, though, when it comes to that.
That's incredible. That is incredible. Lorcana front, just getting my deck together, testing out some new cards. I think we're narrowing in. I think I'm up to 55 or 56 cards that are pretty settled, and we'll kind of tune in and lock in the last few cards. And maybe we won't. Maybe we'll just fly by the seat of our pants when set champs rolls around. That's always fun too. See how things work out. Because since we don't get a ton of opportunity to test, sometimes we need to test live, which is always a blast. All right, so first things up, what you mentioned from our last episode, the quote amethyst problem that was discussed at length. I just wanted to weigh in a little bit. I do love the amethyst ink color. It's probably my favorite ink color because, inspired by my wife, drawing cards is a great way to win a lot of card games, and amethyst is a draw color. So I like to draw cards because it feels fun to have more cards in my hand than my opponent and have plenty of options to play the game with. That being said, I do recognize that amethyst is arguably the strongest ink color right now. Some might say steel, which is a fair argument, and because there is a decent amount of draw and efficient draw options in steel as well. That being said, I do think that amethyst is one of the only ink colors, maybe the only ink color, that you could run a very competitive monocolor deck of just amethyst cards, and you have some very good cards packed into that 60 card deck. There's a lot of playable cards out there, and I think you'd be able to fill out a 60 card deck with just amethyst cards and do just fine. We're seeing that a lot in a lot of the meta reports and a lot of the big tournaments that have been out there. Amethyst seems to be at the top of every single one of those fields, whether it's amethyst steel or amethyst sapphire, amethyst emerald, or amethyst amber, amethyst ruby. It seems like every amethyst is so good that it pairs well with every other ink color too. Do I think it's an issue? Do I think it's a problem? And do I think there needs to be a ban? No, there definitely does not need to be a ban, I don't think. I think you could there was some interesting propositions of what would fix the issue or fix some things, and I do think that Sail is a very strong card because you effectively get to ramp for free in the later stages of the game, where you can play it double ink and then play something for the same ink cost that you started the turn with anyways, and then your next turn you have way more ink anyways. So there is something to be said for the power of that card. That being said, I do think that it is still effective in the sense that it is, if you did not have Sail in the game, then you do not have a consistent way to ramp on 2, and it feels much more of like a high roll to be able to ramp on 2 and on 4 and on 6. And I'm not even sure that there's a way to ramp on 3 consistently, so then you're waiting till turn 4 to ramp, and then you pretty much take Sapphire out of the meta for that matter. I don't know that you would be able to play any of these really big control-y decks if you weren't able to get up to those ink totals really fast. Because some of these fast, aggressive lists are going so fast that you have to double, or you have to ink at least one. You have to ramp at least once, if not double ramp, in order to get to your power turns in an effective manner to be able to slow the game down enough to take over those and turn the corner against some of those really, really aggressive decks. So I don't think that there's a problem. I don't think there needs to be a ban for any cards at this point, because I do think, like you mentioned, Mac, at the top, that when you were talking about going into set champs, you're really excited about the wide meta. We do see a very, very wide meta, even in these major tournaments. Yes, we're seeing probably 25 to 30% of the field being Amethyst Steel pretty much at all of these tournaments, and that's just because of the consistency of the deck. And I don't know that that's an Amethyst issue. I think that's just the way that they've designed cards, that Steel is the removal color, and ways that you win. Great consistent ways to win card games is to draw more cards than the other opponent and have very efficient ways of removing cards from your opponent's field. And so Amethyst draws the cards, Steel removes the cards from your opponent's field, and you have the best of both worlds in that sense. You do see, Amethyst taking over a lion's share of each of those fields at the major events. So yes, that is a thing. I don't think it's to the point where, like the red, blue, or blue steel lists were pre-Hiram and Fortisphere bans, where it was only red, blue, and blue steel at those events. There was like 5 or 10% meta share for the rest of every ink color out there, and then the large majority of those events was just those two color pairings, and largely the same lists with like maybe 5 card differences between many of those high performing lists. I don't think we're seeing that right now in Amethyst or in any Amethyst piles, because you're seeing Amethyst Steel and Ruby and Sapphire and Emerald and Amber all being highly competitive decks to play with. So I think that I would like to just kind of maintain status quo. Maybe it's a little bit biased because I do like the Amethyst color so much, and because the card draw is just so much fun to me. And then like the complexity and the different layers of the bounce package and things like that get layered into it. But I do recognize that Amethyst is probably, arguably, the strongest ink color in the current meta, where you could probably reliably run a 60-card Amethyst deck and do just fine at whatever set champs or event that you go to. So those are just some of my initial thoughts on what I was listening back to for the last episode. Do you have anything you want to elaborate on, Mac, from what I said?
Yeah, the only I have a counter argument, and then kind of a point made based on kind of our discussion from last week too. So the counter argument to what you just said, especially when we talked about what the problem was with Ruby Sapphire and Sapphire-Steel, how like those were the only decks, or took up a fair majority of those tournaments at that time. Really, the counter, thinking back on it after I've had a chance to digest that banning conversation a week ago, is when those cards were banned, set 7 was really only 2 or 3 weeks old. And so what we've seen with every set and the release of every set is that it takes a good 2 months, upwards of, I'm going to say minimum of 6 weeks, probably 6 to 8 weeks, for the meta to really figure itself out. And I think the counter argument to that is, I don't know if we ever had that opportunity to have the meta fully flesh itself out during set 7. Now, was that the first time we saw truly 2 decks dominate off rip rather than people just trying things out that we normally see in the first 2 weeks of a set? Yes. I think everything during that time, right? There weren't any major tournaments. The last major tournament were the Continentals in January, and then we had Worlds, and this was right in the middle of that. So like there weren't any like big DLC type. There were the mid cap events, right? But there weren't any like big DLC to kind of see that. So the counter is like, I don't think the meta was fully fleshed out at that time. Whereas this right now, we can, there's an argument to be made where the meta kind of feels like where it is now. And that meta is purple. And so I think we've had more time in this meta to fully figure everything out. And it's just dominated by just purple in general. Whether or not we see every iteration of purple is another thing. So sure, there's that parity there, but it's still really only one color that takes up a majority of the field. And I think that's where the frustration is. Now, on the flip side, should we ban a card? I think over the course of the week when I thought about it, like, I think why people are frustrated is that the good cards, the really, really good amethyst cards, sure, we had the bounce package in the goats and the foxes and the stuff and friends on the other side that were a part of the rotation list, so to speak. But like the really, really, really good cards like Elsa and Genie, who have been staples since upon their release, like they weren't even up for rotation. Whereas all the other good cards from all the other colors, or like a good chunk of them, I'm thinking especially Ruby, right? Like they were all on the chopping block, right? And so I think that just feels bad where like purple kept so much and other colors lost a lot. And I don't know if that's purple's fault, right? It just so happened to be that's when they were released. They were released post 5 and beyond, right? So maybe, I know Ravensburger, I don't know how far in advance they're testing. Like right now we're in set 10. They're probably planning out into set 18, let's say, or maybe that's too much. I don't know how far out they're planning, but my point is like they're testing cards that are way in advance right now to see how they fit into what is today and what they're going to anticipate is going to be rotated out 9 months from now when the next rotation happens. So like there's a lot of planning involved. So like how they missed this when they were planning for this first rotation, I can see the frustration there. And maybe it's just a set 10 thing and we had to increase the power level of set 10 based on what we had in Fabled. And we're only going to be increasing the power level, hopefully, in other colors. And hopefully we give other colors some semblance of card draw. But I personally, to your point, I don't feel overwhelmed by purple, which is, I think, sure, it's really strong, but I think there are ways to beat it. You just have to plan for it a little bit harder, as opposed to like Hiram playing you down. I get a free 2 cards, and then if you don't answer it right away with a Brawl or a little Sisu, I get another 2 cards. I get 4 cards for a 4-cost card. So that's, I think, was more on the unfair side versus this. Like, it's manageable as long as you plan for it in the right way. And let's hope other colors get better later, right?
Yeah, I think that we'll see. We'll see how the next set rolls out. We've seen a couple of cards come out from Winterspell, and we'll just hold off on commenting until we have the official full slate of releases that are out there after release season concludes. But safe to say I'm excited about the cards that we have officially been released for Winterspell, and it'll be interesting. I do want to get into some of the other color combinations out there. We're not going to talk about any purple deck lists today, so that's kind of fun. We did have a commenter, John from Australia. Thank you for commenting again for a second time to clarify your name and exactly what you wanted to see. And so you asked specifically for us to show some love to Sapphire-Steel, and lo and behold, Mack is a Sapphire-Steel stan now post rotation, and without his Ruby board wipes, now he has to find a different way to wipe your board. So he's apparently leaned into the steel ink color. So Mack, do you want to share your screen maybe share your deck list and we can talk through some of the decisions you made and talk through some of the decisions of things that you excluded as well. So let's get into that. Are you able to share your screen?
Yeah, I'll pull it up now for those on video and doing the video feed. It'll be easy to follow along here. However, we will, for those of you on audio, we will explain through everything, talk about the cards we are pulling up, so that you
And we'll
are
also
not
post these
left
deck
out.
lists on our Instagram as well. So if you're not yet following us on Instagram, feel free to check us out there, and you'll be able to see the deck list that we're going to talk through now.
Yeah, good point, Ryan. Thanks for mentioning that. So really, Sapphire-Steel. This plays very similarly to my One True Love and Ruby Saph, what it once was. Kind of that control removal. It has that feel to it. We'll talk about kind of what my thoughts are on playlines. And especially, I think the one that's not really a controversy, but it's the biggest talked about card in this list, and that's the Aerial. So, at first glance, Ryan, what do you got?
First question for you is what drew you to Sapphire-Steel this set, and why do you feel so excited or strong about it?
Right. Sapphire-Steel, good point. Two really big reasons. First one is easy, Sapphire. So, ramp. I still love the turn 2 ramp into a 4-cost card on turn 3, or some variation of that. So whether it's Tipo, Sail, 1 jump ahead, that's my favorite play in the game, or one of the plays in the game is that turn 2 ramp. I just like feeling like late stages of the game, I like the idea of clawing back, and that's what Sapphire gives you, as well as just dropping bombs at the end, and you have an abundance of ink to do so. So that's why I continue to covet the Sapphire ink color. The other thing too are the bombs, right? Specifically the new ones, I think, that are worth mentioning. Goliath and the Headless Horseman are the higher cost ones. And Cinderella, although it's not a top end bomb, it's the new legendary, or a new legendary that I've really enjoyed playing with. So Goliath, Cinderella, and Headless Horseman, what we got new in this set, I've really enjoyed those cards and what they bring to this specific deck combination. So to answer your question, it'd have to be that turn 2 ramp, and then the new cards that have added to this deck. I just think they're really fun to play. But that's the trick, though, as we'll get into it, is when do you play these cards? That's kind of what you got to get into. Is timing is very key in this deck, at least in my initial round of play testing. I've been play testing this for about a week or two now, pretty heavily. So.
Yeah, so the Cinderella you're talking about is a 4-cost uninkable 2/3 quest for 1, and it has a princess tag, which is important. And at the end of your turn, if you played a princess character this turn, you may put a card from your hand into your inkwell face down to draw a card. So you effectively get to ramp again with the turn that you play her, since she does see herself as a princess character that you played this turn. So you get to ramp and draw a new card, so kind of this card filtering effect. And then it looks like, if you go back to your full list, that you have slotted in a handful of other princesses to find additional triggers off the Cinderella. Were you intentional in finding different princesses to put in, and do you see multiple triggers off of the same Cinderella being hugely impactful? Or do you see just like the one trigger being plenty of impact on the game for you to kind of snowball and run away with it eventually?
Yeah, that's a good question. The title of my deck is More Princesses. So to utilize that princess effect, so to speak, specifically with the Cinderella. I have a total of 13 princesses in this deck. So almost, almost a quarter of my deck is a princess. So very much trying to double ramp, so to speak, or initiating the Cinderella Dream Come True effect twice. That is kind of like the ultimate goal. It's not the end of the world if I miss it. But what's nice is that the other princesses that are in the deck are actually good cards. So that being the Kita Creative Thinker. I only run 2 copies right now. Reason being is, first and foremost, my 4-cost card of choice is the Cinderella. Kita is a turn slower because you have to exert her the next turn when she's dry, and the card that you put into your inkwell is exerted, so you won't be able to use it until your next turn anyways. But it's there as kind of a worst case scenario in case I don't hit the Cinderella. Other play lines, though, too, can happen on turn 3, and I'll get to that in a minute. So it's just, I'm very much an option player. I want to have multiple options for each iteration of what I want to do each turn. I feel nervous when I just go hard in on a 2-4-6 combination. And for those of you who aren't familiar, the 2-4-6 in this deck is turn 2 ramp into a 4-cost card on turn 3 into a 6-cost card on turn 4. So effectively double ramping within that sequence to get to your bombs quicker. One way to do that is to remove the Kita and just strictly focus on the Cinderella. That makes me too nervous because inevitably you're not going to have the perfect hand every turn. So that's kind of where I come from it. Another princess is the Namari from Jafar, set 8. At the time, I have alluded to it before in a previous podcast, this is the first set where it's really kind of taken control or taken a hold of, and people are utilizing it finally. I kind of slap myself every once in a while, like, why didn't I buy it when it was $12? Because when I look at this Namari, I'm going to use it in very simplistic terms, and I'm going to compare it to red. It's 0-5, but gets +1 strength for each card in your discard. Well, conceptually here, when you play this card, odds are you're at least going to have a couple cards in your discard already, maybe more. So it's effectively maybe a 3-5 at minimum. Also, it allows you to filter your deck by, on play, you may draw a card, then discard a card, and then every turn you can draw an extra card, and discard a card at the start of your turn, right? So like you're filtering your card, which is something that if you're on purple, even like not being able to draw the card, filtering it to get through your deck to get the cards that you want is super important. Quest for 2. And it's 5-cost inkable. So I look at this like, in a weird way, Maui Hero to All. Because by the time Namari is on the board, it could be a 6-5 like Maui was. What Maui gave you was the rush, right? This doesn't have the rush, but what this has is, again, your ability to filter. It will only get stronger because you will continue to discard cards, and it's still Quest for 2. If there's nothing for you to swing at, you can Quest for 2. So to me, it has that similar feel or that similar board presence as what Maui was. And then it's a princess. So if you happen to have a Cinderella on board, you trigger the Cinderella and you can ramp and draw a card. So that's why I've been finding this Namari really fun. And then ultimately the last princess is the Aerial Sonic Warrior, the 6-cost, shift 4, 3 willpower, or 3 strength, 8 willpower, Quest for 2. But whenever you play a song, you may pay 2 ink to deal 3 damage to chosen character. I don't have a lot of evasives, and I run 11 songs. We'll get to that in a minute. I'll get the right number in a second here. But you hitting a song like the new Baby Zeus. He hurled his thunderbolt. You got Strength of a Raging Fire. You have these damage songs, and then on top of that, you can deal more damage by paying 2 ink with this Aerial on board. And it's a princess, so again, you have that princess trigger. I think this card is super underutilized in this deck. Some people like to go all in on the Headless Horseman route. Some people like to go all in on the Aerial with even more songs, like the new what's the 1-cost song that was released this set? It's But
I'm much faster.
Yeah, so it's just another song. You can sing it, or you just pay 1 ink and then you pay 2 more to deal 3 damage. So 3 ink for 3 damages can be critical. I in this deck have chosen to blend those two. Again, options. Either if I have the Headless Horse in my hand, I'll utilize that effect. If I have the Aerial in my hand, I'll utilize her effect, because odds are I will also have a song in my hand. Just playing probabilities. So I've been loving this deck. It's been great. So up to this point, this far, and I wanted to show, yes, I do have 11 songs. So a good song rate. And then for the Headless Horseman, again, just for a reminder, 8 cost inkable, 5/7, 5 strength, 7 willpower. Again, quest for 2. When you play this character, each player draws 3 cards and then discards 3 at random. Choose an opposing character and deal 2 damage for them for each action discarded this way. Action. Songs are still actions. And I have a third of my deck are actions. Like, odds are I'm going to be dealing at least 2 damage, probably 4, and then my opponent has to do it too. And I think we're in a very strong action meta, especially if you're playing blue-green. This deck is very good, at least in my experience, in blue-green specifically, because you utilize your opponent's actions against them. That's what I'm running with so far. I'm gonna let you ask a couple questions because I know you've been kind of thinking about it, and maybe you start thinking about what our listeners would ask from a Sapphire-Steel perspective. What else can I provide on this list?
Yeah, one important thing with that Headless Horseman that you talked about, it does have a shift option. You don't have the shift targets in here, but you do have a shift for 5 options, so maybe that comes into play in future sets if we start playing that 4-cost Bodyguard Headless Horseman in these type of lists to have that shift option. That being said, the other big thing with the Headless Horseman's effect, the Curse Rider's effect, is the disruption, right? And I think that's where you get a lot of value into blue-green or other combo decks, is you get to really hammer the disruption on them just by having them discard 3 cards at random. Because by the time you get this card down, probably turn 5 at the very earliest, if you're somehow like quadruple ramping, their hand is pretty slim, and so they probably have been curating it and preparing to play their Malicious, Mean, and Scary Prince Philip combination. And so if you're able to, they have 2 cards in hand, and it's those 2 cards left over, and you have to force them to discard 3 out of 5 cards that they end up after they draw. You're probably going to hit one of those combo pieces. Odds are you're going to hit one of those combo pieces, which is hugely impactful on the outcome of those games, just because they no longer have the opportunity to board wipe you, and you can just keep questing away because you're probably ahead of them at that point. So that disruption piece is huge in that card. One thing that I wanted to ask, so 2 questions. One is what do you feel like is your strongest or your most ideal play line in this deck for the first 5 turns? And then what would you say is your most impactful aerial play? So you have aerial on the board. At what point do you feel like aerial might be the strongest in this matchup or in any of your matchups? Just kind of, is it on you play it and then on the next turn where it's the strongest? Is it kind of when you're up on 10 ink and you can play it and sing something else with a different character you already have on board to instantly have that effect? What do you feel like is kind of the bread and butter for that aerial card, and what's your ideal play line 1 through 5?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me get into that. First and foremost, so what I do have, I have a limited number of 1-drops, but I still play 7. 4 being Develop Your Brain. A, it's a nice filtering card, and B, it's another action to potentially trigger the Horseman when you play it later. The other 1-drop I have is, and I have been toying with this back and forth, I have Captain Hook because of the Challenger and the board presence early game. I have 3 copies of those, depending on the matchup. To be fair, though, this was originally the 1-drop Mulan, Steel Mulan, that allowed you on play, draw a card, then discard a card, because it was another princess. But when I was first play testing that with the Mulan, at the stages of the game that would trigger the Cinderella, Mulan just feels bad because you want to play bombs at that stage in the game anyways. So it also, I can get the argument too, the Mulan is nice because you're filtering more cards, getting more cards in your discard, and then making Namari that much stronger when you play Namari. But this card, you're discarding, and your discard pile ends up getting pretty big anyways, at least in my experience. So I'm not worried about Namari not being huge when I end up playing her. So I switched it to Captain Hook for the board presence. But to your point, obviously it's matchup dependent, but I'm just going to talk about it, a blanket statement. Yeah, you're still always looking for your turn 2 ramp. If my first 7 cards, even if I have the Cinderella, because I have play tested where if I don't have turn 2 ramp, but I still have the Cinderella, I still keep the Cinderella. But there have been times where I've missed turn 2 ramp and then Cinderella just feels useless. So no matter what, I still throw all 7 cards if I don't have turn 2 ramp. But with 4 TPOs, 4 sails, and a single 1 jump ahead, I think the percentage is like 94% that I will have turn 2 ramp in my hand to start the game, which feels great. Then ideally I go into Cinderella on turn 3. Cinderella is just too good. Again, you get the double ramp effect, and it's a 4-cost card, which allows you in a pinch to sing He Hurled His Thunderbolt with Cinderella if you need to the next turn. But primarily it's double ramping so that on turn 4 you can play your 6-cost cards. And that is the part of the deck we haven't talked about really. Is we've talked a lot about the Cinderella turn 2 ramp. We've talked a lot about the princesses and the horsemen. But truly speaking, this deck is built around 4 Goliaths, 4 Tinkerbells, 4 Hades, and 4 Vincenzos. I have seen lists that don't run 4 Vincenzos. I find it too valuable not to, just because of the top end that that card gives you. And it's, again, another deal 3 damage. There's so much like deal 3 damage or deal X damage in this deck, where that's where that control-y feeling comes in. Playing Cinderella into a 6-cost card like Ariel, Goliath, or Tinkerbell feels great. I've actually lately, it's either been Tinkerbell or Ariel for me, because yes, Goliath is awesome, but Goliath feels really good when you're like, it's your last card to play. And sometimes you still have 2 or 3 cards in your hand where it doesn't make sense to play Goliath just yet. So I view it more Goliath as what I'll do with 7 ink or 8 ink, because odds are that's when it truly is the last card in my deck. But that's the ideal, is turn 2 ramp into a Cinderella, into Ariel, Goliath, or Tinkerbell, depending on the matchup, really. And then from there, it's just, okay, can I draw Hades? Can I draw Vincenzo? Can I draw a Horseman? And then watch my opponent suffer, because my deck has so much top end and removal once I get to that stage of the game that it's hard for them to come back. But yeah, I do see the arguments, though, with Goliath. Why don't you... Some people have been switching back to Doc and getting that instant card filter. I just liked having the 6-cost inkable quest for 2 option, because with the Ariel specifically, I have so much more value on my turns 4, 5, 6. I have, again, more options. And that's all what I want, is more options. I don't want to get into a pinch where I feel like I've bricked my hand. In this specific setup, I rarely run into bricking, which feels great. So I don't run Doc. I found myself filtering just enough, but I do see the arguments with Doc versus Goliath, or maybe a combination of both.
Great. There's 2 other cards. And then maybe you can touch on the Ariel piece actually next. So Ariel, when do you feel like Ariel is the most impactful? Is it on turn when you have 8 ink, when you have 9 ink? Is it when you have...
Yeah, that's a good point.
6 ink or 7 ink when the turn after you've played her? When is she most impactful?
Yeah. Ideally, in a perfect world, it's when you have 8 ink, so you can play her. And then ideally, you'll have a Cinderella, Kita, or Namari on board, and you can sing a Thunderbolt or even a Tipo, so you can sing that 1 jump ahead that you have, right? You can sing a song and then use your last 2 ink to then deal 3 damage to a character that your opponent has. That's the perfect setup. But what I found is, like, the one thing that feels bad but also doesn't feel as horrible as you might think is that playing Ariel on turn 4 with 6 ink and then but not being able to trigger her right away doesn't feel that bad, because then you just have like 6 damage to play with the next turn anyways, and you're able to effectively wipe your opponent's board. Something that feels awkward, and I've noticed, and you will run into it, is like you'll have Cinderella on board, you'll play the Ariel that turn, you also have a Thunderbolt in your hand, and it's just like, ooh, I should probably sing this to remove someone, but I don't have 2 ink to then damage something else. But like, boards aren't on that play line. Boards aren't as wide unless you're playing Amber Steel. Your opponent doesn't have that wide of a board yet, so like it doesn't feel that horrible. And then you'll just inevitably end up drawing another song later, where then you can just start triggering aerial after aerial, and it feels kind of devastating for your opponent when you're dealing that much damage just for the cost of 2 ink at a time. So yeah, that's kind of ideal. Is she's very much probably turns 4, or sorry, 5, 6, 7 after I have the Cinderella, maybe after Tinkerbell. So I'm either looking for the Hades, Vincenzo, or Ariel at that time. After kind of the Tipo, Cinderella, Tinkerbell. That's my preferred play line as of right now.
Interesting. That's great to hear. Thanks for diving into that. I noticed in your action package, you do not have the board wipe and Spooky Sight, which is a 6-cost uninkable action that puts all characters cost 3 or less into their players' inkwells. You instead are running 2 copies of Sudden Scare, which is a 4-cost inkable action, which puts chosen opposing character into their player's inkwell, and they put the top card of their deck into their inkwell as well. So they get to double ramp off of it. Do you feel like you have missed the board wipe? Obviously, you feel like you haven't because you're not running it. But what are your thoughts on Spooky Sight and Sudden Scare?
Yeah, that's a good point. And that Spooky Sight, Sudden Scare, Visions of the Future, and Ink Runner. Those are kind of in this pool of what are my tech cards going to be, right? And those are the cards I'm still playing with. I have opted for Sudden Scare specifically for what I have seen. I've practiced a lot more mid-range and control decks. So it's just bomb after bomb after bomb. And Sudden Scare gives me another option to remove their bombs to hopefully have them just run out sooner than me. And then ultimately, that's how I win. That's what Sudden Scare is for, is kind of the late game targeted removal to that key card that your opponent has on the board. Spooky Sight, yes, it can be effective. It can feel clunky in my play line right now to have a 6-cost uninkable in my deck, when really it's only super effective against what, in my experience, the Amber Steel aggro. Sure, it has its uses against other opponents, like Amethyst Steel. Like, they run a lot 1, 2, 3 cost play line. But I feel like inevitably I have enough control with my current mid-range cards in the Heath hurls his Thunderbolt, Strength of a Raging Fire, the Tinkerbell, and then really setting up that aerial. Those slots are already covered of when you would play the Spooky Sight anyway. And then the Sudden Scare gives you that top end where it's just like, man, this Clarabelle is just destroying me right now. I need to get rid of this card. Sure, I give him more ramp, but Clarabelle is in a control deck anyways, where they already have a lot of ink. So it's like, to me, that doesn't feel as bad. Giving them more ink in a deck where, like, at that stage in the game, you're really not going to utilize it, at least in my experience, as much. The one card, though, that's actually like... So I spoke to you about, like, Ariel. That's kind of like the big tech card in my deck, right? And some people just don't have the Ariel, have about the same number of songs, but really play into the Headless Horseman and add a lot of actions, specifically the Spooky Sight and Visions of the Future, to really utilize that Headless Horseman. And I get that argument, but again, to my experience, like... the perfect play line never exists in a game. So that's why I like having the options, and the Ariel provides me those options. And so I've opted for a hybrid version of both. But a lot of people play the Horseman version just fine, and have had a lot of success with it. I do miss having Visions, so I'm still trying to see on if there's a way to include Visions, but I don't really know what to remove yet in my current iteration of the deck, if I were to include that.
You do love your scry cards, I will say that. You do love Visions to develop. You try to find a way to fit them in no matter what deck you're playing, if there's blue in it. One card that I've seen popping up, one character card that I've seen popping up in some lists, and just like one or two of, is the Pluto Steel Champion. Have you considered that as part of your deck to date, or is that something that you have not yet explored?
I haven't. I have seen it. I haven't explored it. I just don't feel like I challenge a lot with steel characters other than Tinkerbell, right? My damage and board control is based on playing songs and triggering aerial, not necessarily challenging. So I don't use it, but I can see an argument where that is effective. If you remove the aerial piece, you have more options to add steel characters to utilize that. Something that I also haven't mentioned that I forgot about previously was Ink Runner, right? I did mention that, like being able to have alert to deal with evasives. As of right now, I've been okay with that, without that, because again, Ariel applies the board or the damaging aspect that Ink Runner wants to do, which is how do you handle evasives? That's ultimately the question, and I feel like it can handle evasives decent enough with Ariel. Now, again, I haven't the two decks I haven't played a lot against are the two big decks in Blurple and Amethyst Steel. Help me out, Ryan and Nathaniel. I need a lot of play testing against you two to see how it feels. But the other card that I haven't mentioned is the Lexington. And that was something that Ernie, our guest from last week, had mentioned. Like, don't lose sight of Lexington. That alert, 4/4, can be very effective against evasives. I think if I were to... I like Ariel, but I'm not, like, super set on her. If there is a world where I remove Ariel from my deck, I think it would be adding Lexington, Ink Runner, some combination of that to deal. I think you have to. You have to have that alert value if you don't have the pay ink to deal damage to chosen character value that Ariel brings you. You have to find a way to deal with evasives, and I think those are just two options. Two ways of doing that. Ultimately, though, you only have 60 cards, and I want to stay at 60 cards, and I can't play everything. Which we've alluded to it before, like this meta, it feels weird having 70, 75 cards that you then have to pare down to 60. That's a good problem to have, but to my point, like you can't play everything as much as you want to. So this is what I'm running into, and I like playing big bombs in the Tinkerbell, Goliath, Hades, and Vincenzo, and it's been fun.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your list with us. Thanks for talking through it with me and answering a lot of my pointed questions. I do want to share the holiday Christmas list, the red, green, ruby, emerald list that I have in front of me. So let me share my screen here for those that are watching.
I'm excited, just as the listeners, because I have not seen this yet. So I'm curious to see what you have about, and this will be a live reaction on pod. So we'll see how it goes.
So I'll just talk through the curve. You have your 1-drops, you have 8 1-drops, you have Webby, and you have Tinkerbell. Webby gives you that shift option into the Webby Vanderquack Junior Prospector, which is a 4-cost inkable 2/4, shift for 2 with Ward, and whenever this character quests, if an opponent has more cards in their inkwell than you, then you can put the top card of your deck into your inkwell face down and exerted. You can also quest for 2, so you get lore, you get to ramp off of their ramp, and so that's kind of a nice little shift line you have available to you. And more importantly, this is a 4-cost card, which means it's a 4-cost singer. And if you scroll down, you have your song package. You have Malicious, Mean, and Scary, which is more for the combination. You have Mother Knows Best, which is a removal option, and you have your Welcome, which is like a removal or control option to kind of subvert your opponent's tempo and try to get ahead with that advantage there. On your two-drop line, you have Lumiere, you have Diablo to brawl and to quest, and you have Ursula to disrupt the songs from your opponent. So if you're playing a steel matchup or you're playing another green matchup, those are the most common color combinations you'll find those songs in. So you're dropping that Ursula to get some information about your opponent's hand and also to take one of their resources away from them. 3-drop line, you have your shift options. You can either go the Clarabelle route or you can go the Prince Philip route, depending on what you have in your hand at that point. Clarabelle shift option is a 3-cost inkable 2/3. When you play this character, if your opponent has more cards in their hand than you, then you may draw a card. And Prince Philip is a 3/2 ward that quests for 2 and shifts into the big Prince Philip, which is a 9-cost inkable 6/6 evasive, shift for 6, quest for 3, and when you play this character, banish all opposing characters that are damaged. So that's your shift option off the Prince Philip. The big combination, if you're not aware of it yet, is the Prince Philip combination, which is this. You have this 3-cost Prince Philip that can sing Malicious, Mean, and Scary, which Malicious, Mean, and Scary is a 3-cost inkable song that places 1 damage counter on each opposing character. It does not deal the damage, it simply places it there so it gets around resist and other damage avoidant effects in that way. And then for 6 ink, you shift this big Prince Philip on top of the exerted Little Prince Philip after it sang its song, and you banish your opponent's entire board because you placed a damage counter on every single one of their characters, and now they are all damaged, and you can banish them all with this big Prince Philip. Otherwise, you have your Clarabelle option, which is your draw package or your draw engine, where you shift for 5 with the big Clarabelle, and you draw up to your opponent's hand size at the end of your turn. For your other 4-cost options, we already talked about the Webby Vanderquack. You have your Goliath and your Hercules, which are really going to survive against those steel decks, since you have your 5 willpower, and your Hercules cannot be damaged unless it's being challenged. So you have both of these 4-cost options are going to avoid avoid the removal that your steel opponent may be prepping for. And same with Webby. If you just have Webby that you didn't have the shift option, you didn't want to play the shift option, you just play it down on turn 4, it's going to sit there because it is warded. Your opponent cannot choose it. So all 8 of your 4-cost cards are going to stick to the board pretty much no matter what. The Goliath is probably the most fragile of those options, but that being said, 5 willpower is still a lot for an opponent to get through on their turn 4 or turn 5. And then on your 5-cost options, you have the Headless Horseman, which is a 5-cost uninkable 4/2 quest for 2. When you play this character, you may banish a chosen opposing character with strength 2 or less. And then whenever you banish a character on your turn, each of your other characters gain 1 strength this turn. Moving into kind of your wheelhouse here, you have your David Xanatos on 6, you have your Hans on 6, which I believe Mack is a fan of, and you have your 6-cost Maui Half Shark, which everybody, if you've been playing since Azurite Sea, you know Maui Half Shark is a very, very strong card. Maui Half Shark is a 6-cost inkable 7/5 evasive character, and whenever this character challenges another character, you may return an action card from your discard to your hand, and when you play an action, you gain 1 lore. Notably, the interaction for the Maui in this deck is another combo piece, which is Next Stop Olympus, which is from set 10 Whispers in the Well. It's a 2-cost inkable action, and if you have a character with 5 strength or more in play, you pay 2 less to play this action, so effectively you play this action for free if you have a character with 5 strength or more in play. And the action that you get to take is you ready chosen character. They cannot quest for the rest of this turn, and the next time they challenge another character this turn, they gain 1 lore. So you have a couple of combo options in the deck. You have this like song control package in the deck, and you just have some really strong Ruby cards from set 10 in this deck too. Mack, what are your first impressions?
Yeah, so first impression, it's just so unfortunate. Like, Christmas, I love the colors. It's really fun, very much on brand for this episode. But this is probably the weakest combination in the game, which is a little sad. But the biggest thing is, where's the card draw? It feels like it's very much dependent on the Clarabelle, right? Which almost every green deck feels that way these days. But you do have the Clarabelle shift is something. That's the first impression. Is the shift lines actually look really fun. If you can pull off the shifts with either the Webby or the Philip or the Clarabelle, those shift lines are really fun and they line up pretty nicely. I mean, the Webby you can shift on 2, but then you can shift Clarabelle on 5 and potentially Philip on 6. That's kind of a fun little play line that you can work into. I do love the Xanatos and the Hans. They're fun. I don't think they're like perfect in this current meta, but when you do play them, especially in a limited set, they're really fun to play with. I love the Headless Horseman too. I think it's a card that's only going to get better as more Ruby cards are released and just can have Ruby be more efficient again. But the other first impression is, like, we got to give some more love to that Maui. We need more actions. That's the only thought I have. Was there any considerations when you were putting this together? I know this isn't your ideal deck, so definitely not critiquing you because this looks awesome. But like, more like the discard package too. Maybe like is Undermine. That's kind of a card that could give you a draw, or the Sudden Chill. Like, those are other options too, more actions to help feed the shark.
Good point. Would love more actions. Just felt like, when I would want to play Undermine and Sudden Chill would be well before Shark would be on board, so they didn't really felt like they fit as well. And really, Shark's just there for the high roll of, you have Next Stop Olympus, you play it once during the rest of the game, and then all of a sudden it's sitting there and you play the shark, and now you have this endless loop you can create and gain a ton of lore off of it, and effectively board wipe your opponent. I guess I had not considered those other actions, simply because I was anticipating I'd want to play them well before Shark came down on the board.
Well, I did think of other ones though too. With red though, especially this combo, I one of my favorite cards in the game, and it's not really super playable, is the Robin Hood, the 4-cost uninkable Robin Hood sharpshooter. That might be a fun thing to do. And then as well, I just thought of the Pirate's Life. So that's also an option too. Not just like in general, people that want to play a Christmas theme around the holidays. These are other options too that you can filter in. A lot of the fun cards, though, are uninkable, and it's not a ramp deck that you can get rid of all the uninkables, and Robin Hood is just another one for this deck. So managing that is key, but yeah, this is fun. This is something, this is a combination I've wanted, or have tried, set 7, 8, just to see how it feels. It's something that I think, at least from what I've heard around other, like watching other content creators around Lorcana, like this is a combination that people want to be good and are desperate to be good. It's just not good, to be blunt. But there's still hope, hopefully.
One other playline I thought about that I could find a way to fit into this deck too is the power line shift line as well, including Pirate's Life, and then maybe something like Under the Sea as a different song option for removal. That could be another way to kind of beef up the deck or make it more control-y. I don't know what you would be able to cut for that, but you'd have to make some trim something somewhere. But that could be another consideration as well.
Yeah, or the Max Goof, to your point about the Goofy movie theme, right? And keeping that on brand. But yeah, this is very much a deck that seems like you want to 1 drop on 1, 2 drop on 2, 3 drop on 3. Watch your shifts go crazy, right? And manage your shifts based on whatever you draw. But yeah, it's fun. This is something that I think I'd go in with low expectations, but still have a blast playing it. So thanks for putting this together, and very much on theme for at least our neck of the woods in the holiday season.
Absolutely. It was fun to put together, to say the least. All right, so I do want to move into one last thing with you, Mack. Curious what your favorite societal holiday tradition is. So, for example, my favorite society holiday tradition, not necessarily a personal family one, but just like what I like to see out and about while this time of year is rolling around, are the holiday light displays. Just a lot of bright lights on people's front lawns that you just get to drive around and gawk at and admire. It's part of the magic of the season for me, and it's really fun for me to see. So that's one of my favorite things that our society indulges themselves in this time of year.
I don't do it very much during the season, but for the most part, ironically, every spring break when everyone wants to go to warm weather places, I go to Montana and ski. So that's very much within the winter branding, is ice skating and skiing. I'm not very good at ice skating, but I love the activity. I look like Bambi on ice, so picture that in your mind. And then, but skiing has been something that I've been doing, downhill snow skiing in the mountains of Montana since, I don't know, since I've been 7 years old. I think the first time I went. So I've gone a lot over the course of the last 2 decades, and I love it. And I've got my wife into it, trying to get my kids into it now. We'll see how it goes. Very much like every other kid that's 5 and under. If they don't get it right the first time, they get pretty frustrated, and we'll just see how long they last. But if that doesn't work, we'll bring sleds along, and they always have a blast sledding and playing in snow, as I alluded to before. But I might have to catch on your theme of just got to get some nieces and nephews into the game of Lorcana. Maybe that becomes my new holiday tradition around this season, is spreading the love of Lorcana and the joy of Lorcana within this lovely giving season here in our neck of the woods. But all jokes aside, our big thing at our house is, especially like early part of December, is Christmas movies, and we're a Christmas jammy family. We buy a new round of Christmas pajamas every single year. This year we had some comfy powder snow blue ones, all matching, of course, to the point where our youngest now asks when we do movie night, or when my wife or I bring up the potential of movie night, he now asks, should I go put on my Christmas jammies? Or, because he calls them his movie jammies. He's associated those specific pair of pajamas with movie night jammies, because that's what we do during the holidays, is watch a handful of Christmas movies. So it's pretty cute. He runs upstairs, puts them on, and then we can't start until he has them on. So our tradition at home, I love the kind of the snuggle season with all the blankets and pajamas and whatnot, and that's kind of near and dear to our personal side heart. But I think overall in general, the cozy feeling of a warm cup of coffee with chatting with friends and the people you love, or like hot cocoa, that's probably the biggest favorite societal tradition that I think other people share as well. But very much enjoy that on our end too.
That sounds adorable. Just that little voice piping up saying, should I go put on my movie pajamas now? That's great. Absolutely great. All right, well, that'll be a wrap on this episode. Thank you all for listening. Be sure to check out our Instagram and our YouTube channels as well. We'll post some other additional content there periodically between episodes. Thank you all for listening. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere you get your podcasts, basically. And feel free to leave us a like and a comment. We love hearing about your insights and any critiques or any corrections from anything that we may have said or gotten wrong. Feel free to let us know about that too. And even if we got something very, very right, we'd love to hear that too, because who doesn't like a little ego boost in the middle of the week too? Thank you all for listening again. And without further ado, let's get to talk about it.